Hello mortals, welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be exploring the hidden giants of prehistory. Because our picture of the prehistoric world is dominated by visions of dinosaurs and other megafauna, it can seem like life back then was pretty simple. But while the giants got all the glory, there were plenty of little guys making big impacts too. And some of them are even weirder than the biggest beasts. So join us as we look at three of the weirdest small creatures that had giant impacts on the prehistoric world. One way that prehistoric critters got around the whole being tiny thing was to grow in layers. Most people think of the giant prehistoric animals as being massive from the get-go. Duh. But a lot of these monsters started out their lives as not very scary at all. Take our lead story subject Titanoboa, for instance. This absolutely gargantuan snake is the largest predator anyone has ever found, with fossils showing it could reach lengths of over 50 feet. And since snakes can go without eating for long stretches of time, this means that it would have been able to hunt large mammals and maybe even whales. In fact, considering its sheer size, paleontologists believe that Titanoboa was probably an ape's predator. And yet it grew up starting off as a relatively harmless noodle. That's right. Like many modern snakes, Titanoboa probably hatched out of an egg smaller than a golf ball. These eggs have even been found preserved in South American caves along with those of other ancient reptiles, helping scientists determine this growth strategy. But Titanoboa wasn't the only prehistoric animal to take this approach. Many dinosaurs also hatched from comparatively tiny eggs and grew into absolute units. Some of the first dinosaur fossils discovered in the 1800s actually came from eggs that were no bigger than goose eggs, which led people to believe that dinosaurs were much smaller overall than they actually were. Modern estimates suggest that the average sauropod hatched from an egg about the size of a basketball, which is still pretty small compared to the full-grown adults. But some tiny creatures weren't just growing in size, they were growing in numbers as well. One example is Archaeopteryx, one of the earliest relatives of birds that lived during the Jurassic period. The fossils of this bizarre mix between a dinosaur and a bird are so iconic that there's literally one in the logo of the Royal Ontario Museum. But while Archaeopteryx might have looked impressive with its combination of feathers and teeth, it was actually pretty small, only about the size of a crow. But they more than made up for it in diversity. According to a recent study published in 2021, there may have been as many as 60 different species of Archaeopteryx flying around, swimming around and slithering around in the late Jurassic, a mind-boggling number for such a small creature. They would have been living alongside some truly terrifying predators like Allosaurus, but managed to avoid becoming a meal thanks to their small stature. Instead, these early birds were more likely to be found hopping around on the forest floor looking for something to eat. But while there may have been dozens of species of Archaeopteryx, that doesn't even come close to the total number of insects alive today. As far as we can tell, the earliest insects appeared on land at roughly the same time that the first animals were adapting to life on land, and arthropods have been everywhere since. During the Carboniferous period, which took place around 359 to 299 million years ago, insects reached incredible heights, no pun intended. The air was filled with gigantic dragonflies with wingspans of up to 30 inches, and the tallest order of insects ever recorded, the Protino orders, were also around. Their exoskeletons have been found preserved in fossilized tree sap, giving us a clear look at these enormous bugs from a time when insects ruled the skies. But the smallest creatures didn't always live on land. The oceans have always been home to bizarre beasts that few humans will ever see. Take, for instance, Helicoprion. Despite being a fish, this creature was known for having one very unusual body part, a spiral-shaped tooth whorl. Now, despite the name, this was actually a modified gill arch that the shark-like fish used to feed itself. But exactly what it used it for has been a matter of debate among marine biologists ever since. It was first discovered in 1924. Originally, scientists believed that it was used for crushing shellfish, but others argued that it was used for catching prey in the water. However, a recent 2020 study suggests that Helicoprion used its spiral tooth whorl in much the same way that a pelican does, as a scoop to gather fish and plankton. But Helicoprion weren't the only small sea creatures making waves. Jellyfish have been swimming through the oceans for hundreds of millions of years and remain one of the most diverse groups of animals alive today. But jellyfish have also been growing larger than normal during prehistoric times. Take the aptly named giant Ocero, a type of jellyfish that lived during the Eocene epoch. The fossils of these ancient anemones show that they had stinging cells that could grow up to 30 millimeters long, more than twice the size of the cells of modern jellyfish. That meant that getting stung by one of these jellyfish would have been an incredibly painful experience. Scientists believe that there were many more large jellyfish living in the Eocene, but their soft bodies haven't left many fossils behind. Paleontologists instead have to estimate their sizes based on the size of their stinging cells. The fact that they were rarely found in the fossil record might also mean that they were seasonal migrators. If that's true, it could be that every year, massive blooms of giant jellyfish would appear in the waters, stinging anyone unlucky enough to get too close. While there's no evidence that any prehistoric animals specialized in eating jellyfish, it's possible that there were some creatures that had tough enough skin to make a meal of them. And speaking of animals that have existed for hundreds of millions of years, let's head back to the land where our final prehistoric mini-beast awaits. Millipedes have been wriggling across the Earth for over 400 million years, often surviving multiple mass extinctions. And one of the weirdest members of this group is an ancient relative called Nemodesmus. Now you might be asking yourself, wait, aren't millipedes already weird? And I wouldn't blame you for thinking that because they really are. Just think of all those legs. But Nemodesmus takes things even further with its extremely elongated body. The fossil of this bizarre critter shows that it was nearly 2 feet long, with each segment of its body bearing 2 pairs of legs. This gave the millipede an incredible ability to move through its environment, but also left it vulnerable to attacks from the very small. See, despite its own immense length, Nemodesmus was still a relatively small animal overall. And according to researchers, it probably fed on fungi and bacteria. This diet would have been common during the Silurian period, an era that began roughly 443 million years ago. When the continents were largely devoid of plant life, it wasn't until the late Silurian that plants began to colonize the land, kicking off a chain of events that would eventually lead to the rise of humans. So if these small decomposers hadn't been there to break down organic matter, life on Earth might have turned out very differently. But it wasn't the only small prehistoric animal to have a huge impact. The reality is that most prehistoric animals were neither huge nor terrifying. Instead, they were small, struggling to survive in a world full of gigantic monsters. But it was their sheer number and resilience that allowed them to not only thrive, but shape the world around them. From shaping entire ecosystems to influencing the course of evolution, these little guys had a big impact indeed. So what do you think? Do you know that so many small creatures thrived in prehistoric times? Let me know down in the comments section below. Don't forget to stay tuned for more information. And as always, thank you for watching.